OMG. I finally confronted my mom about her toxic behavior after years of emotional neglect. Now, I'm just waiting for the fallout. Hello, Reddit. I am uncertain how to begin this since this is my first time posting here. I have often watched videos of individuals sharing their experiences and receiving responses from compassionate online strangers, and I am curious if this could be beneficial for me, or at least provide some comfort. For context, I am 19 years old, female, and one of 4 siblings raised by a single mother, who is 40 years old. My relationship with my mother has always been somewhat strained. From a young age, I was compelled to take on responsibilities that were inappropriate for a child, and I have held resentment for what I had to endure. Not only was she emotionally abusive and unsupportive, but she also exhibited physical violence and had a terrible temper. Some have suggested she might be bipolar, a thought I've entertained myself. Given this dynamic, I have always felt the need to tread carefully in conversations with her. I have lived with her for most of my life, except for a period of about 3 years when we stayed with my grandmother, who is my mother's mother. Naturally, I formed a closer bond with my grandmother. She offered me understanding and a space to express myself without the dread of judgment or emotional outbursts. At that time, my grandmother was subtly leveraging my troubled relationship with my mother to raise me as if I were her own daughter. If my story ended there, I wouldn't be as troubled as I am, but unfortunately, it does not. Returning to my mother, our complicated relationship stems primarily from her lack of empathy and the unrealistic expectations she places on me. Despite my efforts to meet those expectations to the best of my abilities, she fails to recognize that I may not be suited for everything she anticipates from me. I graduated high school at 17 and have completed 2 different programs to earn certifications as a phlebotomist and an electrocardiogram technician. I had to wait until I turned 18 to enroll in these courses and save up the required $1,700, but I succeeded and am now certified. Currently, I await responses regarding a new program I recently applied for to become a medical assistant. Amid this stress, my mother seemed oblivious to how it affected me, which led to several arguments. I continuously attempted to communicate how I felt, only for her to dismiss my feelings as inconsequential and simultaneously blame me for not confiding in her. For as long as I can remember, that has been our relationship a frustrating cycle that makes me question why she treats both me and my feelings as if they lack significance. This brings me to the events of about 5 days ago. My mother and her partner, whom I believe is 52 years old, had a serious physical altercation resulting in my mother sustaining a cut on her chin while her partner suffered some scratches on his face. I woke up to my mother screaming that her partner had injured her, and my initial reaction was horror. I rushed to the bathroom to ascertain the situation, but they simply closed the door and continued fighting. After several warnings, I threatened to call the police due to the escalating violence. It was imperative to intervene for the sake of my siblings and me. My younger sister and brother were at school, and my older sister was not home to witness what transpired, leaving me to manage this chaos alone. After continually urging my mother's partner to leave, I returned to my room to gather my things and meet up with my boyfriend, who had heard about the incident in detail. He insisted on accompanying me to the school for my enrollment, understanding that I had just been through a traumatic experience. We handled my enrollment tasks, caught up with each other, and he later took me to his place, where I stayed until around midnight. Thankfully, when I returned home around 1 a.m., everyone was asleep, sparing me from any fallout regarding my reaction to the fight. However, things did not stop there. My mother subtly displayed passive-aggressive behavior toward me as if I had physically harmed her. For additional context, the fight was triggered by her partner's interactions with other women online, which has frequently caused arguments between them. Witnessing my mother's treatment of me, rather than addressing the actual problem, infuriated me. I fell back into old habits, isolating myself and avoiding interaction unless necessary, which was not difficult since I had previously dealt with periods of self-starvation from ages 10 to 14, a behavior I recognize is unhealthy. Regrettably, I have lately reverted to such patterns, leading to a 30-pound weight loss over the last 4 months. My overall health continues to deteriorate, further complicating my daily interactions with my mother. If not for me, our relationship would not have deteriorated to this extent, but I can only control my own actions. I cannot compel her to care about my feelings or consider me in decision-making, which is her responsibility. While talking with my boyfriend, I recounted these events and other similar experiences that have left me confused. I understand that many people have more severe struggles with their parents and face worse circumstances than I do, but that does not diminish my desire to escape the emotional turmoil I have been subjected to. Nobody deserves to feel unloved or uncared for by their parents. It appears my mother is doing the bare minimum and expects me to appreciate her for fulfilling her parental duties, which is disappointing. As a child, I was optimistic, hoping things would improve, but that has not happened, and I have lost faith that it ever will. My mother has repeatedly shown me that I cannot trust or confide in her without sacrificing my peace of mind, as it would only provide her with more ammunition to use against me. I learned to express my concerns without engaging in arguments, but when I attempt to communicate respectfully, she quickly deflects and interprets my words as disrespectful, asserting that I have no right to voice my feelings. Growing up, I assumed the role of caretaker during my mother's various plastic surgeries, including a breast augmentation when I was 10 years old. I was expected to care for her during recovery, despite my youth. A few years later, at age 15, she underwent a Brazilian butt lift, and I again found myself in the caregiver role while also managing my younger siblings and school during the stress of COVID-19. The burden of these responsibilities severely impacted my mental health, leading to symptoms resembling depression and anxiety. The deterioration of my mental and physical health felt exacerbated by the lack of independence I had, given my mother's disregard for my feelings. Even though I found solace in the companionship of friends and art, my responsibilities consistently reminded me of my lack of control over my life. My situation may not be as crushing as those I previously described, but it does not excuse the emotional neglect I have endured. I have worked to unlearn many toxic behaviors, slowly improving my ability to establish boundaries, voice my discomfort, and ask questions without feeling shame for my ignorance or confusion. Recently, I learned that my sister was performing below grade level. My mother was bewildered by this feedback. After explaining what it entailed, I suggested we have her practice math at home, which had been helpful for me. My mother agreed, and I created simple math problems for my sister after dinner. Despite my mother spending 2 hours with her, my sister struggled to solve them. The next day, I sent my mother even simpler problems for my sister, who had only solved 2 correctly from the previous day. When my mother called, she misinterpreted my tone and accused me of being rude. Finally, I had enough and expressed my frustration candidly, outlining her unreasonable behavior and asserting my right to be treated with respect. She responded by hanging up and dismissing my concerns as a child's place. However, I reminded her that I had been forced into the role of a parent far too early in life, caring for someone who should have been taking care of me. In our exchanges, I highlighted her partner's misconduct rather than taking issue with me. My mother then resorted to intimidation tactics, suggesting consequences for my words. She fails to recognize that her threats lack weight given all I have already endured. My ability to withstand her intimidation may anger her more than she realizes, as I don't exhibit the fear she expects from her other children. I am open and will not tolerate manipulation, gaslighting, or any form of abusive behavior. I strive to communicate my feelings respectfully, yet she has consistently chosen not to listen, believing she is right merely due to her position as my mother. It is unfair to excuse harmful conduct simply because someone is a parent. With all that in mind, am I the antagonist for confronting my mother regarding her toxic behavior and finally establishing my boundaries? Before anyone replies, please remember that I am a real person behind this screen, and while I understand many individuals lack filters or struggle with politeness, I kindly ask for patience. As I mentioned at the start, this is my first post here, and I am still figuring out how to navigate my situation. I apologize for any typos. I currently lack the energy to revise this multiple times for errors. Nevertheless, I appreciate any feedback and thank all of you for taking the time to read my story. I send my best wishes to everyone, regardless of your beliefs. Story 2. After Grandpa lied in court, he asked my cousin to clean his mess. I confronted him about it, and he just went silent. Summary version further down. I need some guidance. Some time ago, I shared a post about spending Christmas with my grandfather on another forum, and now I want to discuss the easiest task I managed there, changing my grandfather's diapers. However, there have been additional developments since then. I had a conversation with my therapist regarding this issue, as she is somewhat familiar with our relationship from previous discussions. She expressed confusion about why I tolerate this situation, even though it involves my grandfather. I've reflected on it for a while, and then something unrelated occurred that has made me reconsider my relationship with him, especially since he has been dishonest with me too. There are certain aspects I cannot disclose due to legal matters, but I will try to explain. My grandfather and I had a conversation about this over the weekend without directly addressing the main issue. My cousin is like a younger sister to me, and I often take on the role of an older sister for her. She resides in the same town as my grandfather, while I live on the opposite side of the country, and her father also lives far away. My uncle and I are closer geographically than any of us are to my grandfather and my cousin. She is currently entangled in a legal dispute with someone I cannot name yet, but I may share more details once everything has settled. This individual is the man who was supposed to be my father. Until last week, my grandfather played both sides of this situation. He was communicating one version of events to me, my cousin, and my uncle, while telling a completely different story to the individual in question. When he was summoned to court, he sided with the other man, suggesting they consult him because he supposedly knows best. As a side note, I feel guilty since I was the one who enabled this situation. Following my grandmother's passing, my grandfather needed medical assistance, and I was the one who suggested involving this guy, as he is the closest adult to my grandfather. Everyone, including my uncle, agreed, but deep down, I anticipated problems, and I regret not voicing my concerns strongly enough back then. Although this man is not legally designated as power of attorney, he is the primary medical contact listed. Returning to my earlier point, my grandfather's comments to the court prompted him to text my cousin afterward, asking her to clean up his unfortunate situation, which is incredibly disrespectful. He has conveyed entirely different sentiments to us in private, expressing support for the younger ones instead of siding with someone over 50. Anyway, I didn't want to bring it up with him unless he initiated the conversation, which, surprisingly, he did. During our daily phone call, my grandfather repeatedly complained about my uncle, my cousin, and the other man dragging him into their drama. That's when I asked, "Grandpa, can I be completely honest with you?" He responded, "Yes," I said. "I am quite disappointed in you." My grandfather replied, "You shouldn't pay too much attention to your cousin. She lies frequently." I countered, "No, she is not lying about this, and I know, as she is not my only source of information." He asked, "Oh." I continued, "I also consider what you tell me and what my uncle states." He insisted, "I had to tell the truth, I only told the truth." I responded, "You either lied to me, my uncle, and my cousin now, or you misled us previously. What you said before does not match what you are saying now." He fell silent. I expressed, "I'm terrified now, Grandpa. I fear that if I need your support, you won't come through due to the trouble it might cause you." He softened his tone, assuring me, "Oh no, you don't need to fear that, dear." I interrupted him. "But how can you say that? You just treated my cousin that way, so why should I trust that you won't do the same to me?" I was genuinely emotional and wiping away tears. Grandpa became completely quiet and said, "I can't handle this anymore. It's too overwhelming for me." I added, "If you can't handle it, then you cannot keep treating us like this. If you cannot listen to how your actions hurt us, you must stop inflicting pain." I paused the conversation there because I am working on self-improvement and trying to break free from my family's toxic patterns. It's crucial for me to recognize when I need to step back, but I also strive to assert myself when I am hurt, regardless of the reasons behind their actions, which is why I needed to voice my feelings. This situation distresses me, even though it affected my cousin rather than me, because if he could act this way towards her, he could do the same to me. I also have my own problems to contemplate concerning my grandfather. Despite everything, I deeply love him. He has been my first and longest friend, even if that notion feels somewhat naive at my age of 28. For full transparency, my family has often operated with a golden child mentality, wherein each adult has their own favorites, sometimes several. Grandma's favorites were my younger brothers, while my grandfather's were me, my cousin, and her little brother. In recent years, my grandfather has attempted to rectify this by giving more attention and material possessions to the younger boys, although in my family, being a golden child usually revolves around material gain. It feels as though we are dishonest individuals molded into worse people. I cannot comprehend how the biggest favorite could be treated this way by him. Even as a child, when she misbehaved or stole, she still received praise, while I faced reprimand for lesser transgressions. It makes me question how he could do this to his favorite and how I can trust him regarding my situation. In my country, if this adversely affects her case, she may be deemed untrustworthy in the eyes of the legal system. She is only 20, but this label could follow her for life, meaning if she were assaulted in the future, her past may influence the outcome, potentially leading to her being further victimized. This is incredibly serious. I have identified two possible explanations for my grandfather's behavior towards her, and both, in my view, are selfish. One. Fear. I recall when I was 8 or 9 years old, we had to flee to another city to escape my father's violent threats. My entire family managed to hide the situation from the authorities, so there were no police involved. But fear is a powerful emotion. I find it selfish because I have faced similar choices, and despite being terrified, I consistently chose to defend the innocent. 2. He simply does not wish to be involved in the drama, which, considering the circumstances leading to this legal matter, is incredibly selfish. If that is the case, I would struggle to look at him again. I genuinely need advice. I am unsure of what actions to take, what to think, and I am overwhelmed by these thoughts. One painful realization is that I might struggle to heal while keeping my grandfather in my life, which is difficult because I doubt he has much time left. It brings me happiness to know he can attend my upcoming wedding, but now I am uncertain. Summary: my grandfather has deceived me, my cousin, whom I view as a younger sister, and my uncle regarding a legal issue involving her and someone I refer to as Braggart, the man who was meant to be my father. In court, my grandfather favored Braggart, contrary to what he had privately communicated to us. Following the court proceedings, he texted my cousin, asking her to assist him with a mess he caused, as if nothing had occurred. I confronted him, and he provided no substantial justification, only weak excuses, then shut down when I held him accountable. This situation deeply upsets me because if he could treat her this way, how can I trust that he will defend me? My family has a pattern of favoritism, referring to the golden children, and even though my cousin is the favored child, he still let her down. I see two possible reasons behind his actions. 1. Fear. My father was abusive when I was young, and we had to escape for our safety. Perhaps my grandfather is afraid of Braggart. 2. Indifference to the conflict. This would be profoundly selfish. Now, I am not sure if I can maintain a relationship with my grandfather while also finding healing. I was initially pleased that he would be attending my wedding, but now I am unsure if I want him there. I need guidance. I'm at a loss for what to do and feel confused about everything. The lengths of these relationships are complex, as my grandfather is the father of Braggart and my uncle, and these connections have lasted a lifetime. Here is a brief overview of our ages: me 28 years old, female Braggart approximately 50 years old, male uncertain if he is 51 or 56, uncle 47 years old, male cousin 20 years old, female grandpa 75 years old, male people indirectly involved: grandma deceased. She and grandpa were together for 55 years, fiancé 27 years old, male together for 10 years, younger brothers 20 years old, male, one is under 10, male cousin under 10 years old, therapist cannot state her age, but I have seen her for a year primarily to address family matters. Story 3. Bully breaks my phone. I babysit his sisters, frame him for alcohol theft, and he gets grounded, sells his console for my repair. OMG. Hello, amazing members of Reddit. I have significant free time today. My friend, who is also my employer, is taking the children for a walk. and I decided to share my personal story of retribution here after my friend encouraged me to do so. She also insisted on assisting with my username, so I appreciate that. Throughout my school years, I was always the kid who faced bullying. The girls would spread lies about me, while the boys would relentlessly harass me. From a young age, I was certain I wanted to be a nanny. I adored babysitting and caring for children, so it felt like a natural career path. I made the error of confiding this to a girl whom I believed was my friend, and she went on to inform everyone at school. Because this was viewed as feminine, I quickly became the target of bullies. There was one boy who took pleasure in tormenting me. I will refer to him as Jack for the purposes of this story. Jack was dreadful. He would follow me home, pelting me with objects, vandalizing my school assignments, calling me horrible names, stealing my belongings, and cutting my hair during class, among other things. I was terrified of him. The situation escalated to the point where my fear of encountering him at school would keep me awake at night. I hold him and his friends responsible for the anxiety I experienced and still experience to some extent today. I reached my breaking point not long after Christmas when I was 15. My family didn't have much money, but we managed. My mother had saved for a long time to purchase my first phone. It wasn't the newest model, but I was ecstatic nonetheless. I felt guilty knowing that she had forgone her own Christmas outfit and postponed fixing her phone to buy it for me. When school resumed after the holiday break, Jack learned about my phone. He snatched it from me, mocked my messages, making fun of the lack of contacts and telling my mother I loved her, then threw it to the ground and stomped on it in front of his friends. I was infuriated, upset, and heartbroken that this bully had ruined something my mother had worked so diligently to give me. I began plotting my revenge. I had heard through the grapevine that Jack's mother was a stay-at-home mom. His father held a well-paying job, and his mother was quite content to stay home with the children, 4-year-old twin girls. However, I also knew that she didn't go out much, as Jack would outright refuse to babysit, and she was quite selective about who was allowed to care for her kids. I used to babysit the son of one of her friends and was reasonably skilled at it, if I may say so myself. Nonetheless, for my plan to succeed, I needed to babysit Jack's siblings. I casually mentioned to the little boy's mother that I wanted to take on a few more babysitting jobs to save up for my mother's upcoming birthday. Fortunately, the lady recommended me to Jack's mom since it had been a while since she'd had a chance to go out with her friends. For several weeks, I would go to Jack's house with the other little boy I babysat and care for his little sisters. Despite Jack's terrible demeanor, his family was generally kind, and his little sisters were an absolute delight to supervise. Jack wasn't typically in the house, but when he was, it was evident that being civil to me was a struggle for him. His mother would have exploded if he had been rude in front of her or his little sisters. They would have quickly reported him. Once I believed enough time had passed, I set my plan in motion. Jack was one of those odd kids who liked to boast about his stash of adult magazines in his bedroom. This somehow made him popular with his friends. I honestly never understood why. Anyway, every time I babysat and put the little ones to bed, I would sneak into his room and search around. I realized this was a significant invasion of privacy, but I was a foolish 15-year-old and couldn't endure his bullying any longer. Eventually, I discovered his stash and made a mental note that it was in a bag in his closet. Over those few weeks, I had been observant enough to notice that Jack's parents had an unopened bottle of vodka in the fridge. They didn't drink often, reserving it for parties. One evening, after the little ones were asleep and Jack was out with his friends, I went to the fridge, opened the bottle, and poured about a quarter of it down the sink. His parents could afford to replace it. If they couldn't, I would never have done it, before sneaking back up to Jack's room and hiding the bottle in the same bag as his stash. Not long after, his parents discovered what had happened, and after Jack accused me of stealing it, they showed up at my house. They weren't upset because they still hadn't realized who had taken it, so they asked me several questions. I denied everything, but I was polite and even offered to help them look for it in case it had been misplaced. They thanked me but informed me they would find it. And boy, did they find it. The following day, I was called over to take the little ones to the park for a little while so that their parents could have a conversation with Jack. They didn't want to argue in front of the twins as it frightened them. When I returned, Jack was in his room, and from the sounds I heard, he was crying. It turns out he had implicated himself. His parents found the bottle of vodka in his room along with his adult magazines. His mother despised anything of that nature, as she viewed it as degrading to women, and she shamed him by gossiping to the neighbors about his unhealthy obsession with sex. He denied everything and accused me of planting the alcohol there. When asked why I would do such a thing, he admitted it was payback for him breaking my phone. His parents went wild. They had no idea their son was such a bully. They confiscated his phone, grounded him, and made him sell his gaming console to cover the cost of repairing my phone I had been saving for weeks. The expression on his face when they made him hand over the money to me is something I will never forget. His parents also discussed the bullying with me and eventually informed my mother as well. I had concealed it from her and told her I had dropped my phone. He faced serious consequences at school after several other children came forward about the bullying they had suffered at the hands of Jack and his friends. A few of them, including Jack, received suspensions. Jack's parents even forced him to go to the door and apologize to his victims. I initially hesitated to accept the money, as it far exceeded the amount needed to fix my phone, so his parents compromised and instructed me to take enough to cover the repair cost. With the phone repair costs handled, I was able to purchase an amazing birthday gift for my mom. I understand this is quite lengthy and possibly poorly written. I am not a writer, so please excuse any mistakes. Summary: a bully at school damages my phone, so I babysit his sisters to frame him for stealing his parents' alcohol. They make him sell his gaming console to pay for the damages. He is also suspended from school and required to apologize to his victims. Edit: I did not expect this to receive so many upvotes. I appreciate all the kind comments and awards. I have been reading through the comments and apologize for not being able to respond to each one individually. Anyway, I just wanted to express my gratitude to all of you generous individuals.